So I'm going to start off today talking about a bit of a career crisis that I had about 4 years ago. It was an early stage startup. I was leading both product management and product marketing. I had some very creative sales leaders. And what we found happened is that they would go after our core customer and they would identify what our product would solve for them, and they would get creative. They say, we not only do X, Y, and Z, but we also do A, B, C. And so we were able to acquire customers, great, celebrated. But what would happen is when customers would come on board, our products actually didn't deliver on that core value proposition. And so what was happening was this massive expectation gap was being created between what our customers thought we could do for them and what in reality we could deliver on. And so, as of course the business metrics that were reflected was a high level of churn rates. And so again, we were creating this false sense of growth, right? Like I mentioned before, we celebrated when we would get new customers, super excited about it, and then we would kind of mumble when they would churn away. And so that led me into this little state of crisis as to where, as a product leader, what I'm trying to do here is grow this organization. I'm trying to build products that solve problems and solve very pervasive problems so that we can generate a business. And that wasn't being achieved. And so what I did from there was actually look out into what could change the dynamic there. And so what I had found after doing spent a number of hours researching this and moving on to a few different companies, is the act of executing a product-led growth strategy. And meaning we're going to give our product to our customer before we ask them for money. And it scares salespeople so badly, but it can work. So that's the foundation of what we'll be talking about. So really it's been my experience learning from what's been out there, being presented in kind of the product marketing universe around this topic, as well as my own personal experience of having now led this at Gainsight, which is where I'm at now, leading product growth. Thank you. We all love to follow along. Here's a quick agenda. We're going to talk about what is product-led growth. And if you were attending earlier, you spoke or you saw Kyle Poyer speaking about from OpenView about product-led growth. So I will actually spend probably less time than I typically would on the subject around what it is. We'll also talk about why it matters. And then I'll give you a few examples as a product marketer that you can take back into your organization to start trying these out at your organization. New market, new expectations. How many of us in this room are working for organizations that were born in the cloud? You've always been a SaaS company. You've always had renewal revenue, okay? And how about the other dynamic? Maybe you're an on-prem organization. You're now moving to the cloud and you're trying to jolt your organization. Okay. New market, new expectations. The reason I ask that is that these expectations for some are very well understood, and for those, they're still quite new. And so really the three dynamics here that we're going to talk about, the first one is the fact that you have this subscription model. No longer can you sell your customer once and then kiss them goodbye, right? Is that you have to deliver repeat value to them in order to keep them. The second dynamic here, as it relates to product-led growth, is the ability the expectations that customers have of your software. No longer can boring enterprise software, which I've been involved in boring enterprise software for quite some time, you cannot be boring anymore. And so the expectations that your users have are now influencing whether or not they continue to use your product. And lastly, is that it's never been easier or more cost-effective to introduce a new SaaS offering today. And organizations now, what this results in is that you are now competing with more than just the top two known competitors. There are myriad of solutions that you're now competing against. So all three of these dynamics are what is influencing the different go-to-market motions that exist today. So let me walk through. This is an evolution chart, and it's not to say that any of these models are dead or no longer exist. It's that we have, as an industry, have evolved into how we can deliver our products and how our products can deliver value for our customers. So the first, you had your field sales team, right? I always imagine like the vacuum cleaner person like walking up to your door, selling you this amazing vacuum cleaner, even though you already have one. This was, very well adopted in the early 90s. More efficiencies came into play with the introduction of an inside sales team. So now you have kind of this concept of closers, and you have this concept of your outbound sales organization trying to drum up new business, and this motion exists now. Again, more efficient than the last. And then with the advent of new technology, the marketing automation space, you now have this concept of inbound marketing, right? We're generating content, thought leadership. We're trying to pull people into our organization as opposed to everything being an outbound motion. And lastly, where we are today is that organizations can now deliver their product ahead of time to that customer before they have made that purchase. This is the act of product-led growth. Now, I'll put some more shape around this in a minute. I'm actually going to pause here. I want everyone to read every single cell here. These numbers are very, very important. We're going to summarize. Companies that have a product-led growth strategy have faster growth rates. They are, if I click through properly, they have higher multiples, and they're just generally worth more as an organization. And it's the act of the fact that they're more efficient with their customer acquisition, their customer and their customer growth strategies. Now, this information was pulled from OpenView. They are one of the brain trusts of the product-led growth movement, and so they've done a good amount of research on the subject. Now, product-led growth, for a cute little definition, is the vehicle, or is that you're using your product as a vehicle to both acquire, to engage with your customers, and to grow with them, right? So think of the expansion. Now, most product-led growth talks focus on the acquisition piece, right? Our mental models are set to where if I have to grow my business, I have to acquire more customers. Many of us in this room may already have a well-established install base. And so you may be deriving additional value, not by acquiring new customers with your product, but leveraging your product to increase retention rates or to identify new expansion opportunities. And so I'll cover some of those next. This is a life cycle, so to speak. It's an exaggeration. It's actually a cute little thing in PowerPoint. But the customer acquisition, the onboarding, adoption, and expansion, these are 4 different stages in which you can apply product-led growth. And again, most are focused on talking about freemium, trial. They want to know when to introduce a credit card. Do you have a sales team? I'm going to spend some time on that today, but then I actually want to introduce the fact that you can use your product for onboarding new customers, increasing their time to value, making sure they understand the value and they're getting it in a very scalable way. And again, also, your products are evolving. Many of us are delivering products in the enterprise space. You know, we talk about how cool we are when we deliver daily and we deploy, it's awesome. But the reality is that our customers are consuming typically on a monthly cadence, and that our products are evolving just as our customer expectations are evolving. And so making sure that you're able to communicate to them in an effective way allows you to increase the retention by your customers increasing adoption of your product. And lastly is the expansion. There's techniques that you can use. I've been in a number of companies now where we introduce pricing like every month, and we think we're doing this great optimization work. And what we're doing actually is creating a massive amount of debt and an inability to enforce it. So one of the, for those who have a solid customer base and you're not yet enforcing whatever entitlements that they have purchased from you, this is actually a great place to start any sort of product-led growth tactic, is to actually enforce the usage of your product when they go above what their entitlements or what they've purchased from you. So for the product marketing community, I'm going to talk about 3 different strategies that you can take back. The first here is that you want to define a product qualified lead. I'll go into what that looks like. The second is that you want to be able to use your product as a marketing channel. That poses challenges. We can overcome them. And the third is that to focus on customer outcomes, right? Making sure that your customers are delivering or receiving the value that they had anticipated receiving when they first bought your products. So again, keeping these 3 areas in focus. So a product qualified lead, right? We're all familiar with the marketing qualified lead. People are engaging, customers are engaging with our website. We try to infer intent from that. There are heavy debates around the validity of this method when it comes to sales readiness and sales accepted leads and inbound leads. The concept of a product qualified lead is different in the sense that it is the activities that users are taking in your product, not just the activities they're taking on your website. So think of the features that they've adopted. Think of the number of people within their organization who have accessed your product. All of these are indicators that would qualify a potential customer as a product qualified lead. This also changes the acquisition process. The dynamic is different. So in this model here, what we're looking at is the customer lifecycle. You have, again, your inbound strategies. These are things that are taking place on your website. You're running webinars. You're trying to attract buyers to you. You have visitors. They still have the concept of marketing qualified leads. You have your sales qualified leads, and it's your marketing team and your sales team, and you have your customer success team on the delivery side, right? This is the marketing qualified inbound universe. So how this shifts is you actually see the product influence moves much, much higher into the consideration cycle. And so you have content, you have paid, you have all of your marketing campaigns, but you've now introduced this new stage, which is product qualified lead. Users are in your product, they have begun a trial. That doesn't always mean they are ready to buy from you. So as counterintuitive as it is, your inside sales team is going to jump on it and say like, this is the most indicative signal that they want to buy from me. I better call them now. It's actually, once they have understood the value of your product, that's the time to reach out. And that's the intention behind the concept of a product qualified lead. So again, product qualified lead in this model is demonstrating the acquisition process. The same can be applied for a cross-sell motion. So customers that are using 3 out of 4 features or capabilities within your product, unless they have reached that state, they may not be in a state of maturity for a cross-sell product. But how do most of us operate today? We have a cross-sell product, we have our own intentions, we're trying to grow our business, and so we propose to them whenever we can. We say, hey, we have this new thing, are you interested? And the attach rates suffer as a result. So again, keeping the usage of your product in mind when introducing a cross-sell offer is going to make a huge attach rate difference. This is the characteristics of a product qualified lead. You have firmographics. You have the role within your organization. This is applicable primarily to the product-led strategy at an enterprise SaaS company. So who the person is takes a very significant role. What features they are adopting, I mentioned before. How did they value your offering? So the response from a specific survey. Are you still evaluating software like this? Is an indicator of purchase intent. And lastly, because now users are in your product, your support organization, which historically has only been reserved for quote-unquote paying customers, is now part of the equation. What are the questions that are being asked of your support organization? All of these are factors that influence whether or not a person trying your product has intention to buy from you. The second aspect here is to use your product as a marketing channel. One of the biggest differences between, let's say, email, for example, and using your product to communicate with your prospects and customers is that your product has an owner. When working through this cycle at Gainsight, there was a lot of reservation around what type of things we should promote within our product, what type of communications should we have. And this is a natural reservation, right? Your customers on the enterprise side are spending potentially millions of dollars with you. They don't want to be introduced what they consider banner ads in their product, right? They're already paying you money. So how do you overcome that? How do you make sure that your communications are relevant to them? And for pre-sale use cases, communicating into your prospects, again, this is a way to drive those of you who have trials or freemium offerings, being able to communicate to them what the next step in your product is. And for post-sale is for the retention and upsell, and I'll cover that in more detail. In product messages, so communicating with your customers in your product has a 3 times higher engagement rate than through email alone, right? So this is all of our demand gen teams, our counterparts in demand gen, kind of start chomping at the bit here. And the opposite side of the spectrum is also true, is that your product teams get very nervous. And it's not only your product teams. If you have an account management organization, they are very accustomed to meeting with your client one-on-one. They have spent time building a relationship. There is a potential fear that you're going to communicate something and they're going to lose face, they're going to lose credibility. And so there's a component to where all of these product growth strategies, using your product as a marketing channel, needs to be coordinated well and informing your internal customer-facing teams, right? So the goal here is that you're providing value to your customers, both when they're using your product and when they're interacting with your organization. Here are a few examples. So the first here is an example. The first here is an example of a product update. So I mentioned before, our products are evolving. We as consumers of technology are not sitting on our hands every morning waiting for all the technology that we use to update and to learn about it and read about it. So it has to be very easy, one, for me to become aware, or for all of us to become aware as a user of technology, of something that has changed, and then some new value that I can receive. And the second characteristic that you want to address with this type of communication is reducing the friction. Right? What is the overhead that I have to learn in order to take advantage of this feature set? So this is an example. It was a new product release. One of the aspects of our product is that we instrument your product for you so you can see what your customers are doing. And one of the biggest pain points is that most solutions have to manually select this button click means this feature, and it's very time consuming. So we've introduced a feature set that takes away that burden. So we automatically curate all the actions in your product. So this is a communication related to a product update. Again, driving adoption of new product capabilities for the purposes of retaining that customer and then realizing value. A second example here, this is from TurboTax. This is a feedback engagement. So in-app feedback, coming back, this is a Net Promoter Score. How likely are you to recommend our product or service? Very common use of gathering feedback. Not always as actionable as you would like. So you can also introduce customer satisfaction surveys and customer effort-based surveys at a very functional level within your product to help you hone in on the areas that your customers need your help to change your product. So again, another type of in-app engagement. Here we go, we have one here from SurveyMonkey. This is promotional in nature. Hey, did you forget something? Check it out. We have this new Premier plan. It's waiting for you. It's right here. Hit this button. Right? All of these are valid communications, and there's a time and a place for each of these. Lastly here, we've got an adoption-related communication. A customer has the ability for, in this case, LastPass, you can download a browser extension. So you can get more value from our offering by using it in a certain way. So in this case, they're intending to help you adopt the feature set. And there's actually a second engagement I won't talk to you about. It's more promotional in nature. But each of these has their own purpose. And like I mentioned before, because your product is owned by someone, you need to be very careful about what type of communication that you are introducing into your product. At Gainsight, we had a number of conversations around this, and it came down to what is our promise to our customers when they buy from us? What are we promising them that we are going to help them do? And as a result, we established the trust framework for in-app communications. And so first here is that it's timely. And timely doesn't mean on your cadence, right? We introduce a new feature. It's our intention to broadcast it to the world. If they haven't used a given capability, let's take a reporting example, right? Boring enterprise software. We love our reports. If we've created an advanced reporting capability, what are the odds that someone who hasn't created a single report is going to derive value from that yet, right? So it's not actually a great time to introduce that. So there's activities that lead up to when they're actually going to realize value. That actually leads into our second case here, which is relevance. So any communication that you're going to introduce into your product, you want to base it on some activity or potential lack of activity that your users had within your product. Again, this is helping it become relevant. Communications that are relevant are welcome. When they are not relevant, they are spam. Right? We learned that very well through email. It became a very abused channel. And our intention here with this framework is to help you from gaining the advantages of it without abusing this as a communication vehicle. Next up, the U is useful, right? Are you helping your user or your customer become better at their profession? Are you helping them take advantage to save them time? So unless you are introducing a communication that is useful to them, drop it. Don't do it. And lastly is that it's straightforward. Right? We have a tendency to over-communicate. We have a lot of beautiful words, and we like to use all of them. Don't. Be very concise. Right? They're actually in your product to achieve an activity, and you want to make sure that that activity can be completed seamlessly without massive amounts of interruption. So again, the trust framework is something that you can take advantage of when thinking through what are the ways that I can communicate with my customers in my product. I mentioned different categories. The reason that categorizing your engagements is important is because, like I mentioned before, your product team will think everything is a banner ad. And your marketing team will have everything communicated under the sun, think that it's relevant. And so what you want to be able to do is help your users understand what are the things that they can opt out from, right? Opt out of a promotion, that's fine. But we're not going to opt out when there's a new capability, or we're going to help you drive adoption or take advantage of the value that this new feature set creates. So again, making sure that you have operational things that you cannot opt out of, and informational things that you can opt out of. Again, putting yourself into the seat of your user, create some empathy for them and what they're trying to achieve is always a good basis to start with. And lastly, one of the, in terms of communicating with your users in your product, it is, from a lot of the information that I've found, product-led growth talks about the lack or the absence of people. And that is simply not true for so many enterprise SaaS companies today. It's actually a combination of using the product with your customer-facing teams. So what we're looking at here is the process in Gainsight's trial experience. So we, as a new user comes on board, We introduce specific getting started guides. We actually poll them to ask what is their intention with the trial, what do they want to achieve, and then we have guides that are directed that follow up and are personalized as a result. So that is also being communicated through a set of automated emails, as well as personalized outreaches through our inside sales team. We held a customer advisory board about a month ago, and we asked them, how do you want to evaluate software? And every single person in that room responded with, they want to try it themselves, but they want to be able to call someone and talk to someone if they want, right? So if they hit a roadblock, they want to be able to know that someone's there. So again, product-led growth, you have the option for being very low touch. But for many enterprise SaaS companies, there is a sales organization, there's an inside sales team, there's a customer account management team, there could be customer success management teams. All of these players have a part in the growth of your business, and making sure your product is a player that is coordinated with them is where you're going to see the most results. Lastly here, focus on customer outcomes. So customer onboarding and user onboarding. It's often the case, and this is true within customer success organizations, that they will meet with the primary stakeholder, they will have a kickoff meeting, they're going to say what we're going to do this week, they say we're going to do next week, and what the weeks following. That communication is typically with one, maybe 2 or 3 people within the organization. What about the hundreds of potential users after that meeting? So this is where user onboarding becomes a very nice complement that can be driven through the product. Secondly, is that product engagements use how customers are adopting your product to source customer references and create case studies. So our sales organization comes to us at the most inconvenient times and says, I have a prospect, they're in this vertical, they want to see how other customers have used this feature, right? And we kind of gasp because we have generic customer success stories. And what ideally we want to be able to get to is say, yeah, we have a customer that's used this feature, here's the business outcome they were able to achieve, and here's a case study reference. You're not going to get to that level of detail unless you're looking at what features your customers are using within your product and being able to then identify the champions that can be references for case studies. So again, making sure that usage is a part of your case study and customer reference equation. The last item here I mentioned before, driving upsell and cross-sell. Just enforcing entitlements, it sounds so simple, but so many of us are on the honor system, right, when it comes to the usage and the packaging limits that we've set in place. So up until now, there has typically been a set of development resources that are required to enforce this formally. So Gainsight PX, the product that I'm representing, we've taken that burden off of the engineering team, so product marketing organizations can enforce entitlements like this and block product capabilities without involving the engineering team. So again, as you're evolving your pricing and packaging, as your customers are moving up in their adoption and potentially going beyond the entitlements of purchase, you can now introduce communications to them to warn them when they're approaching a limit, and to eventually block them to introduce and create that demand that is going to be the right moment to introduce an upsell conversation. In summary, we talked about product qualified leads, we talked about using your product as a marketing channel, and focusing on customer outcomes. This darkly lit blue link is what I want to leave you with today. So we have crafted, many of these concepts are reflected into an ebook, and so I'd like to offer this ebook to you as part of attending this event. It's related to product experiences and driving product experiences that deliver growth for your organization. I doubt you can read that. Go to bit.ly, and it's free PX book. So if you're interested in learning more about how to apply product-led growth strategies when you do have an account-facing team and you're delivering enterprise SaaS organization or enterprise SaaS, then I suggest you take a look at this book. We have a lot of references in here. And again, I shared a few tips with you today. We go into greater detail in this book. So with that, I would like to thank you. And I think we have some time for questions if there are any. And the mic runner, thank you. You don't have to run, actually, just walk's fine.
So question was something you said about the pricing.
Yes.
Changing your pricing every month. So what do you do when you're in an organization, a small organization, and they see pricing as a lever and they'd like to do a new pricing test every month? How do you kind of combat that?
So testing pricing every month, I did articulate it as a bad thing. That wasn't my intention. So if you are trying to test to see if pricing changes increase conversion, then that's a valid strategy. What you want to be able to do later is tie that. If a customer had purchased and your entitlement changed, let's say it's a user-based system and you get 5 users. If you introduce 10 users, you want to be able to connect that to the customer that purchased to that level and be able to enforce it later. So the actual act of testing pricing changes is a great tactic.
Just a quick question here. I noticed your focus was predominantly on SaaS products. We have a couple of SaaS products, but they're also counterpart, legacy on-prem solutions.
Yep.
And obviously, there's a much longer rollout to adding new features or new capabilities. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations as far as trying to implement that? Your feedback on when and how to ping people is very good, because we've had lots of interior debates about whether adding something is just spam. And when you're looking at a 6-month rollout for the next product or next release, that's a huge issue.
Yeah, so taking your on-prem to a SaaS solution, great move. You're going to introduce the ability for visibility. You'll have better instrumentation. For our customers who are still operating in an on-prem universe, they really need 3 things. One, you need to be able to instrument your product, right, to understand what users are doing within it. And depending on your product, that may or may not be possible. So if it's an internet-facing deployment, that's typically a sign that you could use some of these technologies. And if you have access, or if you have the ability to deploy new changes to that on-prem solution, is kind of the second factor. So if you have to wait a year before you can instrument your product, it's unlikely that you're going to get the kind of value from engaging with your customers using your product in that manner. So you may actually invest in R&D team, but if your strategy is to move to the cloud, then it might just be a stalled effort. Yeah. Question up front here.
Thanks. So we have both a freemium and a free trial. So we have a restricted access freemium where you can do one thing.
Okay.
But if you want to then get the full platform, you have to sign up for a time-based free trial.
Okay.
So I have 2 questions. So one is, do you have any particular feeling about like freemium versus free trial? And then second question, time-based versus outcome-based.
So some of the guidance that I've found related to freemium versus free trial is if your market that you're selling into, if there is a high volume of potential customers, that you could get value through a freemium offering, right? Because the conversion rates, I mean, in an ideal state, you're going to get potentially 15% of them to convert to a paid offering. You have to have a pretty massive amount of volume for that to make a material difference. So that's one factor. One of the reasons we introduced a free trial at Gainsight was to establish trust with our buyers, right? And so we introduced it as a time-based trial. It's 15 days. There was many debates around, should I introduce, should it be 30 days? Should it be 15? We actually looked at the average value, or the average time it took for the customer to realize value. And so we knew what those moments were. And we took the average of that point, and it was roughly the 15-day mark. So we set that as our baseline. So I use a free trial. One is to establish trust with my customer, and also create a sense of urgency around what they can have access to. You'll always give them access. If they come back on day 15 and say, I would like to extend it, great, go to town. You're engaging with me. It's a good signal that you're interested. But having some sort of forcing function to drive urgency is what's intended by setting it some sort of closed time frame. Yeah, that's great. Anyone else? Questions? Time's up. I lied. All right. Thank you very much for having me today. Hey, thank you.